Welcome everyone to our sixth week of our class. The topic this week is creative strategy and the planning and development that goes behind that as well. So there's a lot of elements that go into creativity and advertising. The Clios are essentially the Academy Awards, if you will, of the advertising industry. This is a screenshot of looking at the 2012 Clios and who the best show of awards were. The Advertiser of the Year was Volkswagen for some of their work. Advertising agencies are typically awarded. Agency of the Year was BBDO, which is a very well-known, significant ad agency that's been around for a while. They recognize networks and companies, production companies, and then they also have a ton of awards, just like the Academy Awards do, for different categories. In this case, the film award went to Chipotle. The use of interactive, innovative media. There's a Hall of Fame and then always a Lifetime Achievement Award, right? You have to have that in one of these shows. So they're typically done in New York. It's a very interesting and very prestigious thing for an agency or a producer or someone to get awards like this. So they have their own version, just like the Academy Awards does. And if you look at creativity and advertising, there's two elements that you have to look at. One is a strategy, and the other one is sort of the tactical elements of how that strategy gets executed. And you can be creative in both of those elements for sure. Give you an example. Old Spice was an aftershave, a cologne that was popular when I was growing up, close to 40 years ago. And it was popular back then, and then it sort of kind of trailed off, and there was a great, very creative campaign to sort of bring it back to life. It was a brand that had sort of fallen off the wagon, and they did a great job. And one of the elements they did in terms of moving it forward was repackaging it, looking at a totally new demographic, and these commercials, right, where you smell like a man, and the man your man could smell like. The whole thing was just a very sort of different kind of element. It definitely appealed to a different, newer demographic. It was very effective and helped bring Old Spice out of the doldrums and being a scent and a product and a brand that was associated with people much older to a much younger, hipper clientele, which they did a great job with. There's a couple links there that you may want to check out that talk about creativity and the importance of them. The Apple Macintosh 1984 ad was only aired once during the 1984 Super Bowl, and it has been seen by many as sort of a signature ad that won tons of awards. It was something that was completely different. It was very long and sort of kind of set Apple aside from all of the other computer companies at the time that were out there. And there's a few others, and there tend to be some ads that over time are very different and kind of stick out and are unique in their regard in terms of how they're creative. There's always going to be arguments about what are the top 10, the top 50 even, or the top 100 of all time. But there are some that sort of stick out. Some of these are mentioned as being some of those ads as well. So there's really two different perspectives on creativity. You've got to look at it from the management perspective, and then you look at the people who are creative. And this characterization of age is sometimes accurate. Not always, clearly. But managers tend to want to avoid risk. They want to stick with what works, where people creative really look at trying something different and trying to sort of set the bar and change the dynamic of what goes on. So depending on where you are in an organization, you tend to have a different view of what you will or not be able to tolerate and implement. So things that sort of determine what creativity is, if you've got something that's divergent, something that's original, it's fresh, it's different, it kind of merges some different things, certainly are important. The other thing that you have to think about is relevance. You can have the most creative, interesting ad, but does it really do something to bring home the message and what your strategy is, what your end game, if you will, if you will, to the consumers, and then how that relates also to the greater brand of a product. So again, you have the management or the suits. They tend to be rationalists. They look at things. The creative people tend to be the poets and look at sort of the the bigger picture and the instruments they're trying to sell. So you've got these forces always constantly tugging at each other. But creative personnel tend to be unconventional. They're abstract. They're very much less structured, less organized, and they tend to be very intuitive. So they go with their gut often in what works and doesn't work. If you look at some of the most successful ads and people who create them, they tend to be different. You look at recording artists, you look at actors, you look at artists in general, painters, sculptors. These people tend to be different. They look at the world more abstractly and uniquely, and that's definitely different. And that's why that sort of exudes creativity as well. So the question is, if you're not creative, can you learn it? Can you be sort of taught it, or is it something that's kind of built in you and that's what you really need to kind of move it forward? So that's something that you have to, and is there a process to tease out that information and build it into the advertising and the campaigns and all the specific deliverables that you may be working on? So it's totally important to set a baseline, right? Just like we need a marketing plan, we need to be in line with what the mission and the objectives of the companies are. You need to do this with your advertising as well, and it's really important to use things like interviews or focus groups with customers or potential customers or the market to really sort of do a baseline to see where you are before you know where you need to go. And there are all kinds of ways to do that. There are objective techniques. What you're trying to do is look at, okay, does this concept moving forward make sense? Is it inappropriate because it's not the message we want to send to our target audience? That type of thing. And then there's techniques that you can use to sort of validate that and get feedback, not only on where you've been with your consumers and your targeted customers, but where you're going as well. Storyboards and animatics are ways that companies, agencies, organizations, kind of in a low-cost way, put together concepts that can be validated. When you produce a video or do any other sort of final content that can be very expensive, this is a way to sort of get a feel and kind of play with it a little bit and see what works and what doesn't, and then position it so that you can use these elements to actually put together a final product. Often companies have campaigns. Here's some notable ones over the years. Marlboro's always been about the Marlboro Man and Marlboro Country. Wheaties is the breakfast of champions. They've always associated that with athletes that performed at the highest level. So if you eat Wheaties, then clearly you'll be like them. BMW's always been the ultimate driving machine. McDonald's is about a fun experience. And actually that should be K Jewelers, not, I think it's K, right? How about that? There you go. That makes sense. So K Jewels, every kiss begins with K. That's a really interesting, and it's a nice tagline. And if there's got a jingle that goes with it, and it's very well done. And then Allstate continues to actually still use their "You're in good hands with Allstate," although their commercials have changed a little bit, but they've stuck with that for many, many years, and it's worked for them. So it's very important that you establish a creative brief. What's your basic issue? What are you trying to do? What are your objectives? Who's the target audience? What are the sort of unique selling proposition that you have? What's your creative statement that you want to get going? And then what information and requirements? So it's kind of like a business plan or a marketing plan specifically for the creative element that you're doing. And then you definitely need to have a unique selling proposition. What's the benefit? What makes it unique? And it's going to be something that can really move and motivate a significant amount of people to validate, the development of the product and the creative that you're doing. So every campaign, every ad should somehow have a unique selling proposition that you want to do. In this case, if you look at Colgate, right? Colgate Total fights germs for 12 hours. Is there a connection between the health of your mouth and the health of your body? So good dental hygiene means better health in general, and that's been proven. And they're the company that delivers that with their product better than anybody else, and that's their unique selling proposition. And by the way, the use of red here, red is considered a healthy color, right? So if you're red, it's vibrant, you're alive. as opposed to dark colors or other off colors that are off-putting. And then of course you see the young lady there, she's in white, which is pure, which also signifies health. Everything's working there, from the selection of the colors to the sort of the tagline that they're putting out there, and then the element that they want you to think about. So that's a good job for them of leveraging their products and a unique selling proposition there. Sometimes it's just about image and what you're trying to put across about your product or service and how it works, and clearly that's one for glamour and wealth, right, that goes with wearing the Bebe products. Sometimes you actually try to build up sort of some drama, right, as to what's kind of involved and what's going on about using, so cards are about, the biggest little thing you can do. So little messages can go a long way. Focuses on the benefits of doing that, right? So, why spend a little money, for these things? Because it can be the one thing that makes a difference. Positioning is very important. You need to say, where your product is. So here you've got an ad for Quaker, for basically a motor oil, right? So if you look at that, what are they trying to say? This is a premium motor oil. And it's something that would go in a premium car, which is a Ferrari. You look at these gold-plated horses and motion and performance. They're basically, that when you go to buy this motor oil, in fact, it's not going to be something that you pay very little for. You may obviously pay a premium for because of what it's delivering for you. This particular link doesn't work. I found out. I should have checked it before I posted it up there. But what I wanted to do is talk about this is actually a video that was done from a couple of years ago, and I think the thing that's interesting about this video, as I lower my volume down so I don't break my eardrums here, is I would have seen this video as a great opportunity for a bicycle helmet company, right? So this poor gentleman in South Africa gets, while he's on a trail, gets taken out by an antelope, which is, unbelievable, right? 14 million views on this video. But, I saw this as like, what, if some creative bike helmet company could have paid these guys for this video, and they could have said, look, it's the bike helmet that protects you even from antelopes, right? This could have been a really creative ad, and maybe I'm the only one that kind of saw it, but I wouldn't think so. Especially when they go ahead and they show, here's what happened, right? This is why you wear a helmet. You could think of a bike helmet company saying, this is why you do it. It protects you even against antelopes. So sometimes, creativity happens in different places, and so if what you can do is, obviously the link I gave you isn't going to work, so just go to YouTube and put in, mountain biker, buck crazy footage, Africa, and this will pop up because obviously it's a pretty well watched video, and you'll get a sense for somebody could have done this and done a nice a nice job of sort of linking it back into their products, but they didn't. So you've got to look for creativity in different places, I would suggest. So different kinds of ways to appeal, different execution styles that you have in the way you put your message together. Sometimes it's about just being information and rational. Those don't tend to be super creative, but depending on how you do them and implement them, they can, right? There's some information you want to communicate. Features and benefits, right, is informational and rational. This is a great ad that does that, right? This is obviously targeting students, right? Turning Z's into A's helps, keep you up. It's a creative, interesting little clever graphic, and clearly what they're trying to do is, you take a couple of these guys, it gets you through those all-nighters, gets you that A on the exam. It's a very interesting way of clearly showing features and benefits, but doing it with a nice little creative spin. Yeah, you look at appealing to, feelings, right? Things like safety, fear, love. These are classic, age-old ways to sort of go ahead and whatever your ad is, if you're appealing to these people, it's sort of the feelings element of the emotion element. It can be a much more effective ad, whether they're personal or social-based issues. It's very common practice that companies use that for appealing. And then here, obviously, that's a very emotional ad. The inference is if you use Sky Vodka, you'll be, and I don't know what that landscape is in the background, but obviously some very large city, whether it's New York or Chicago or Hong Kong or some other city for that, and it says if you drink this, right, clearly there are some inferences or implications associated with the kind of people you might hang out with, so to speak, right, or attract. And that's obviously, Sky Vodka had sort of been an older brand, and they did a great job of sort of revolutionizing themselves and transforming their advertising to be more sort of high end. And by definition, right, you're going to pay more for that bottle, clearly, because of what comes along with it, if you will. Here's an example of a rational and emotional appeal as well. So the rational part is, here's our great website that you can use to book hotels, flights, cars, your vacation, your cruise. But the emotional part is, instead of it being for a business trip, right, it's maybe for enjoyment, right? So they're back and everything in between. So we have the tools to get you there from the real world to the surreal world, so to speak. So you have brands associated with any kind of effort, and you have to keep that in mind when you come up with your creative. Now what's happening is you have crowdsourcing. You have user-generated content that's happening through Twitter, Facebook, the web, YouTube, all these other things, where you have customers driving the bus, if you will, and in sometimes doing a much better job than some of your creative people could do. So it's kind of embracing that if you can, which is kind of interesting. Ad techs, there's all these kinds of techniques. They've been around for a while, using a testimonial, a spokesperson, seeing what kind of happens in the world, straight selling, which is kind of sort of, humor. All these things are used and are very, very common in ads. Here's a great example of a demonstration ad, right? That is a Samsung flat panel TV. You can just look at that and know that's probably one of the thinnest flat panels I've ever seen. It's big, it's thin. That tells you can put that thing anywhere. It's sleek, it's sexy, and it comes through very nicely in a very simple ad. Here you have Samsung here in the lower right-hand corner. It's a TV, and it's probably the thinnest on the market, therefore justifying a premium. Sometimes ads use animation. Here's an example of a Schwab ad that uses something called rotoscoping, which is, I really haven't seen any other ads out there, perhaps. They're actually not that easy to produce. They're expensive. Certainly Charles Schwab can afford them. But it's a very unique thing. When people typically see these ads, they tend to associate them with a brand like Charles Schwab, and they do a great job of doing that. Print advertising is a bit different. There tends to be structure to all of those. Sometimes it's a visual that catches your attention, so then maybe you do read something. But most ad layouts are like this, right? This is a clever ad on an echo bottle, or a plant bottle, if you will, right? There's a headline, there's a subhead, there's usually a powerful visual element, there's an identifying mark, and then there's some copy, right? People aren't going to read a lot of details. They might stop and say, okay, that's interesting. They'll check out the headline and subhead. They'll look at the identifying mark. They may or may not read that. Certainly, it's a Dasani bottle. It's promoting that it's a better eco-friendly bottle, I would think. So, ad layouts are pretty traditional. They haven't changed very much. Typically, people are trying to find different ways to implement them. But if you go too far afield from what's traditional, sometimes it's traditional for a reason, because of how it works and how we consume it. TV, very, very expensive. It's not just the sight element. You've got motion that's important, and certainly sound as well. Audio is huge in commercials, and it's particularly TV commercials, and it depends on how you put that information. Sometimes you find ads that have very little sound, which is sort of the anti-version, which also helps sort of catch your attention as well. But if you just look at this breakdown here of what TV commercials can cost, very, very expensive just to create them, get the rights for them, build them up. And this doesn't include the ad space, the airtime that you have to pay for as well. So you've got to be sure that if you're going to put money into a TV spot, now of course this would be the kind of money you're talking about for a national spot, something pretty significant. But you add this times the number of people advertising, it gets expensive really quick. So when you look at evaluating criteria for creative, does it align with the objectives? What's your creative brief and your strategy? Does it get across what you want, your unique selling proposition? Is it the right kind of material for the audience? Is it getting the message across? And is it done properly? So all these things are elements that you should always look at before you sign off. and put that either TV or radio spot or that web ad or print ad up for consumption of consumers. So that's it for this week, and I will be posting a short video on the exam as well. And I'll be on campus tonight. Today is the 5th, so I'll be there in the evening, and look forward to seeing some of you if you're interested in just chewing the fat a little bit and you have any questions on the exam, the course to date, and where we're coming back after break. Thanks.